Hello, hello. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
We have a beautiful reason to celebrate. Do you want to share what we are celebrating today or whenever this gets released? But it's today
Today.
for us, 12th of April.
Today marks 7 years alcohol-free.
Beautiful. Congratulations. I wish we had like a candle and a little cake. We'll get it later.
Yes.
Cheesecake. So, how was that? Do you want to share your main reason for your decision to go alcohol free, and maybe at the same time how that experience was?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main reason for me removing alcohol from my life was because it was creating far more instability than stability. And I had a vision or an idea of the man that I wanted to become or grow into. And I realized that alcohol was standing in the way of that. Because when I took a bigger look and a wider look at my life and how I was showing up or not showing up in certain areas, it was pretty evident that there was an unhealthy relationship within myself and how I connected to my emotions or how I express myself. Because alcohol for me was an easy way to relax. It curbed any kind of social anxiety or any discomforts when it came to that. It was easy to just lean in and kind of get carried away, all in the name of fun, but it was just not serving me anymore. And I really started questioning my relationship with it because it didn't feel the same. I kind of felt like I didn't drink like most people, even though I still, up until when I stopped drinking alcohol, I didn't drink every day. I never drank every day. In fact, in the first year where I was trying to understand my relationship with it closely, I could go months without drinking and having alcohol in the fridge because I was just, when I put my mind to something, I was just focused. But in that year of learning and developing and understanding my relationship with alcohol, I would go these big stints of abstinence. And then when I would drink again for a weekend, for example, or a celebration of a gathering, whatever it may be, I felt like I'd undone all the hard work that I put in. And it wasn't just a physical discomfort as one gets from drinking too much, but it was emotional, it was mental, it was the anxiety, it was the guilt, it was confusion, it was everything. And I'd look at what I'd achieved or accomplished in the time I didn't drink, and then I would look at it in relative terms to when alcohol was more prevalent in my life. And it was very clearly evident that I could just maintain a healthier and more positive momentum without alcohol than with alcohol. And so eventually, after a year of this trial and error and months and going by, that I realized that I was better off without it. And it was equally hard as it was easy to make that decision. It was I mean, 7 years ago, I was the first of any of my friends to even consider this. And I grew up in a very social Australian culture where we were drinking quite heavily when you think about it, from the age of 15. Parties and all the rest, and surrounded by friends who were all doing the same. So it was very easy to blend in and not even consider that there was anything negative about it. So, yeah, going back 7 years, it was because of this evidence that I had witnessed and the information I had received from this trial and error period, it was clear enough for me to know that that was it. And there was a little bit more to it from my personal story. Growing up with my father being an alcoholic, I saw the dark side of what alcohol can do. I experienced the dark side. And so the combination of my own agency and choosing it for myself, and then also having that as evidence, was clear enough conviction for me.
Did you feel like when you made that decision, were your friends supportive in that sense, or did you feel like it was more difficult because everyone around you was still drinking?
I would say, looking back, now that it has been a bit of time, I would say that they were supportive in their own way. You know, they didn't. I had a lot of freedom within my friendships and my circle and people who I loved and who loved me. They knew that I would make choices for myself, quite adventurous choices, and that I was a free-spirited person. So when I shared this decision that I had made for myself, they were supportive. I think, I mean, I don't know what it's like to be them and to have experienced it from their point of view, but there was distance, because when you go from experiencing a friend in this capacity and then that not being available anymore, there's a time of adjustment, of readjustment. And so in my friendship circle, nobody ever questioned it. But I certainly felt more alone. For sure.
But looking back at it, even though you felt alone in that moment and it was, I guess, not easy, now 7 years later, would you do the same?
Of course, yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, it's like anything, right? Like, you step into the unknown, you don't really know the full capacity of what's on the other side. But it's like when it comes to any kind of introspection, personal development, or desire to want to change, it can only happen when an individual is clear on what they want for themselves. It can't be influenced by anybody else. It can't be decided by anybody else. You really, as a person standing in your own sovereignty, you have to make that choice for yourself. And then when you make that choice, you are open to the unknown. You are open to the challenges of this decision and whatever that may be. Because the unspoken understanding is it's going to be hard. Particularly a choice like that, because not many people do it. And not many people do it knowing that they might or should have to. Especially particularly in the culture that I grew up in. It's so prevalent. And as I said, 7 years ago, there wasn't anybody else doing the same thing. But I knew that what was on the other side was worth it. Even though I didn't know how that fully looked, and I certainly didn't know how I was going to feel, I knew it was worth it.
Beautiful.
And that's all that mattered.
And when you made that decision, you said it came from a intrinsic kind of motivation, right? Which is the most important thing in the end. So, because other people, they might go to a rehab, someone else tells them to go, or like a family member or whoever, right? So how did you start it? Did you just stop from one day to the other? Did you just decided to, or did you go to any meetings? Did you have a sponsor?
Well, it's a really interesting story, because I was living in Footscray. I was cutting hair in my friend's barbershop, and there was a guy in there who was going to AA, and he was in his own recovery. And as I said, for over a year, over 12 months, I did this trial and error. And I got to the point where I went on a bit of a bender, and it wasn't destructive in any way. It was just I drank for a few days. And then I woke up and I was just rattled. I was just rattled, like rattled from my core. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And it was kind of like, it came from this real place of vulnerability, of surrender, of just like, man, I've tried everything and I don't want this in my life, but I don't fully know how to get rid of it. And so the next time I saw that guy when I was at work, I said, hey, man, and asked into it and asked about AA and things like that. And I said, do you mind if I came down? So I went down to a meeting on a Friday night, and it was, for anybody who's stepped into any kind of fellowship space, it's for the first meeting or however many is pretty overwhelming and quite confronting. But it's also incredibly reassuring because you get to sit in rooms where people don't just get it, they've got their own version of it. And you hear your story in other people's stories. You hear your behaviors in other people's stories. You feel connected without knowing these people, but because you deeply understand the struggles that come along with this path. And, you know, if I look at it from a retrospective point of view, I used to drink alcohol to ultimately connect with my emotions in some way. Even though it's ultimately a disconnection, it was a way to feel. It was a way to connect. It was a way to shut off my overthinking. It was a way to embrace social settings just more fluidly. And it was a way of suppressing certain things because it was fun and exciting and all of that. So sitting in those rooms, people understand that. They get it. And there's so much more. There's so many layers to it. But they often talk in these fellowships about, in particularly early recovery, to go to as many meetings. Ultimately, if you're choosing to remove something, then you have to fill that space with something else. And they suggest to fill it with meetings. But I wasn't needing that. As I said, I didn't even drink every day. And I'd just go once a week. I'd just go every Friday because I thought, all right, well, instead of having idle hands sitting around on Friday, I'll just go to a meeting and understand it there. And so it was actually really quite confronting because when you step into these rooms, it's, you know, you announce yourself and you introduce yourself as what you are, like whether you're alcoholic, you know, an addict, and there's so many fellowships, right? So you introduce and announce yourself as this person. And so for me, it felt very uncomfortable because I didn't actually feel like an alcoholic, but I knew that my relationship with alcohol was not what I wanted it to be. But I also knew that I was better off without it. So I was kind of in this real grey area. And I eventually did get a sponsor. And I said to him, I said, man, I feel like this is preventative. And he shared with me that it's more common in this day and age that there are people, younger people, taking more preventative actions. And they don't have to go to rock bottom to have to then change their whole life and pick it up. They recognize it for what it is earlier. And that's exactly what I felt. Mind you, at the time, I was in a lot of emotional discomfort because I was trying to understand my pattern behavior and why certain choices were being made. And as I said, I was suppressed a lot from my childhood. And so it was the beginning of unpacking all that and figuring out how things were playing out. So I was doing some very deep introspective work, but I also, as I said, slotted straight into this grey area. And even with a sponsor, like I never called him. I you know, for the record, I worked the steps. I did them all. And I'll put it into perspective. There's some people who spend time in fellowships. There was a guy that I met who was in AA for 7 years before he fully completed all the steps. And I was very fortunate, not only with the sponsor, the guy that I connected with, but also too with my own mindset, that when my sponsor said to me 18 years ago, this is the situation I was in and I worked the steps in a very short amount of time and this is how I do it. And I said, great, you're speaking my language. Let's do this. That's why I'm here. So I actually worked all the steps in just over a month. You know, made amends, did it all that inventory. And it was one of the most refreshing things I've still done to this day in my life, because you actually get a chance to rewrite the pages and clean that slate and call up the people you feel that you might have harmed. And the way that transcribed in my life and experience with alcohol was actually within relationships and within connections. And I wasn't as available as I pretended that I was. And I would have hurt people in the process of that. And so I got to do the inventory and I got to reach out. I'm very fortunate that it was all received. You know, the people took my calls, and not only they took my calls and they heard me apologize, they were incredibly supportive. So there was a lot of blessings. There was a lot of beautiful reflections that I didn't leave a path of destruction. And I felt like I was getting out before it got to that. And
dodged a bullet.
Just dodged a bullet. I mean, it took a lot of work, but I dodged a bullet, and yeah, I said sorry to the people that I hurt. So,
would you say this was also the beginning of your work, your inner work, or was it like parallel, or would you say one kind of ignited the other?
Yeah, it was a great question. It was when I returned back from the US and I was at home, I said I wasn't in a very good place, but I knew, I was determined. I knew that I wanted to understand what was happening more. So I reached out and saw it was like what would be considered like a life coach now. And that was powerful. It was very, very powerful, just because I begun to really understand patterns more, and I really got to witness my relationship with my parents when I was a child and also present, and then how that was playing out and bits and pieces. And so, and then I was catching the train to work every day. And when I was working, before I moved to Footscray and was living there, it was an hour and a half each way on the train. So the book that really opened me up and really put me on this path was a book called The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. And I could not get enough. You know, I would sit there on the train in the morning and I would read and read and read. Unfortunately, I was just very exhausted on the ride home, so I didn't really have the capacity to read on the way home, but I love reading in the morning. And so that book really changed my life. And then as time went on, and as I said, I would go to these meetings, but it would be quite irregular. And as I said, I never called my sponsor. Like, this is a strange concept for anybody, as I said, who's in any kind of fellowship. It's a very strange thing to have a sponsor and never call them. And there was an example where I went into one of the rooms, and I just remember feeling like this is not the root. This is not addressing the root cause of why I even started drinking in the first place. And for the record, those rooms are still, to this day, some of the most beautiful rooms I've ever sat in. Like, people talk about community now and being real and being vulnerable and showing up. It's like, that's a given in those rooms. Like, the strength, the courage, the perseverance in people and in those stories and what some humans have overcome is just phenomenal. So I'm deeply grateful for the witnessing of human perseverance and endurance. And to be honest, like I got to see guys who were of my dad's age who were reconciling relationships with their children. They were taking accountability. You know, they were showing up the best they could. They were changing their lives one day at a time. And that was really humbling and also healing. Even though it never happened in my life, I was grateful that it was happening in somebody else's. And it was powerful, but I wanted more. And I realized that there is also, for me personally, there was also a bit of a heaviness within those rooms and spaces. And what I mean when I say that is more about, it can sometimes feel like it's a little bit more of a victim mentality through some lenses. And I never played the victim in my life. So I really wanted to take accountability and not do that. And so I slowly just eventually stopped going. But I started going deeper within myself and knowing, as I said, that that wasn't going to access the root and I wanted to go that far. And as I said, I'm incredibly proud of the people that I got to spend time with in those rooms, because the reality is somebody removing alcohol or drugs from their life could be and probably is the biggest achievement they'll ever have because of the lives they were living beforehand. It's a relief. It's unbelievable. It's phenomenal for that person. But I said I wanted more because I knew within my heart there's a contract that I had already signed with myself from a very, very young age that if alcohol ever became a problem, I would quit. I told myself that. So for me, it was just staying true to that contract. And I knew that there was so much more than just giving up alcohol. And as I said, it was all preventative. So I was kind of doing it what I felt like on different terms. So I had more capacity to go deeper. And that's exactly what I did.
Within those 7 years, it's a long time and beautiful. Would you say that there were certain chapters? Let's say in year 2 you felt a certain way, or year 3 was especially difficult? Is there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to be completely honest. It's only been in the last couple of years where I feel like I've kind of come out of the woods, you know, because there's so much readjustment. And depending on your relationship with whatever it was prior to removal, then it can just be years of just recalibrating, let alone finding your feet properly again, you know. Like socially, for me, was massive. Just learning to be social again. And I'm a very social person. I love talking and connecting with people, but doing it without alcohol was different. And it just enhanced the insecurities that I had around my worthiness. And then I was tying into people, not seeing people or not being invited to things as a reflection of that worthiness and whether people wanted to actually spend time. So it took me like 2 or 3 years just to become more comfortable socially. And then within that there was, you know, business. And I realized for me personally, in the first 2 years, I was so busy. I was still, even though I was doing great work, I was also distracting myself as much as I could, because for me, it was just, I was still uncomfortable in my own skin. And it's imagine like having to learn how to do everything again, but without it. And as I said, I wasn't dependent. So, I mean, I was playing in bands and things like that. And, you know, alcohol and the music industry it's a given, right? Like it's just, you know, this is part of what it is. So being up on stage and performing completely sober is somewhat meditative, you know, because you're looking at people in the crowd who are looking at you, talking to each other, and then you know that they're talking about you, but you're also just like, don't get lost in those thoughts. Just focus on the present moment, enjoying it. And so everything kind of became like a movie, because you're learning. It's like when you're a child and the excitement of learning something new and like, whoa, and then you start getting it and start making sense and all these things. So there's so many ebbs and flows, but also too, you build confidence in a way that I had never experienced before because it's authentic. It's not fabricated in any way. There's no outsourcing confidence. It's from within.
There's no mask in front of it. It's just you.
It was you because you're stepping into it as you, as your authentic self. And so if you take a knock or you take a hit and it's uncomfortable, then you're like, well, all right, let's sit with that. Let's learn it. It's not like, oh, that was uncomfortable, and then you don't want to admit that hurt emotionally, so you just drink it away, So, but then it was like, okay, well, then I went into a relationship, and then it's like, okay, well, now I'm in a relationship without alcohol, and like any relationship, let's see what hasn't been worked on. Like, let's see what comes up. And then at the time, it was somebody who was younger than me. So then I felt insecure at times, like socially, because I wasn't drinking and I still hadn't come to terms with that. And for me, it was, when I reflect back on it now, like 7 years, I realized that there was still a big part of me that was holding on to that old identity, because there was a lot that I loved in that old identity. And I was very fortunate in the life that I've lived with a lot of traveling, a lot of exploring, connecting with people, deeply sharing, being of service, being fortunate to be invited to a lot of things and things like that. So I've had a very beautiful, well-rounded life. So there was things I missed genuinely. But it was because I was kind of stuck on the fence for a long time, because I didn't really know what the new version of identity really looked like. And so that transitional period did last a while.
Was there also a little grieving about the old persona, so to say?
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, you have to let that part of you go. And when you're not ready to do that, it's painful. And it's sad. Very, very sad. It's like any kind of grief. Sometimes it's not just experiencing it initially, it's the unwillingness to want to let that person go, actually. And so you sit with that grief for, can be a long time. And then and a lot of it for me has been the teachings around worthiness and my non-need for acceptance. Because once I begun to truly understand the past and how it was showing up in the present, then I began to really being able to lean into my future self by letting go. By letting go of what I thought was important, who I thought was important, parts of my identity that I thought were important, why I was holding on to those parts of my identity in the first place. And then ultimately being proud of the person that I've become and the amount of work that I've put in to become that person. And almost like going full circle and returning back to the self, like the alchemist, people talk about. And it's like that. For me, it was like that journey. And I'm a loyal person and I care a lot about people. And so not only letting people in my life go, but also letting parts of myself go was extremely hard. So it within the 7 years, and as you described, like the chapters within that were all within themselves so valuable within that teaching and comfort and discomfort and what is coming up.
And now, being in the most current chapter, do you still feel like, or is there sometimes a feeling of missing out, or like a thought of, oh, it would be nice to have a beer, or like whatever?
Yeah, look, it's really interesting, that question, because it's funny that it's not the alcohol that's missed. It's the feeling that comes with it. Like we're in Vietnam. So here, from what I've seen and understood from what you've shared also, that the culture around drinking is very inclusive, and it's a lot to do with food and gathering. And when I see that, I think, oh, that would be fun, because there is a connectedness with it. You hear people that think they all cheers and everybody drinks together, and it's and I love different cultures. And like music, drinking in celebration is a very easy way to connect with people and have a laugh. And there's probably those things that are missed, but the alcohol, no. Like I love not having alcohol in my life or in my body. I love that part. But it does create particular fast tracks to accessing certain emotions or feels. But on the other side of that, I feel very proud of myself to say that I've thrown it away.
May I share a little cultural insight on that?
Please do.
So in Vietnam, we call nhậu. This means basically snacking and drinking at the same time. It's a specific word around it, and everyone does it after work, on the weekends, during whenever, basically. You always get invited to nhậu. Let's go to nhậu. And the uncles here, they love to drink their beers, like, with the ice cubes. You just pour the sip that you drink and you exit as fast as possible. It's just a cultural thing here, right? And of course, they always invite you because they want to get to know you, they want to drink with you, they want to be your buddy. And I can imagine it must have been always so hard to say no just for the aspect of experiencing that culture, right? And yeah, just a little cultural insight here for the Vietnamese habit, so to say, because everyone does it. It seems insane just to see that as well, right? But luckily, you like to eat everything, so just sitting there and eating everything, they're already very happy to include you in this way, even without drinking. So you're not missing out on all of it.
No, I feel very fortunate. Always since we arrived, and the people I've met, very, very inclusive. And yeah, it's that thing though, right? It is that thing with the identity. It's what you choose to look at. And there was this moment, actually, a very early turning point for me. And there was two things within this turning point. One was I have to focus on what I'm gaining and not what I'm losing. Like that has to be my focus. And the second was I can't look forward. I've got to look back, because every time I look back, it gives me motivation to keep moving forward. Because in the early days, when you're in your first year of recovery, the thought of even getting to 6 months, 12 months, it's incredibly daunting. It's a lot of pressure, unnecessary pressure that you can put on yourself. So I would look back and go, man, 2 months, whoa, who would have thought? 3 months, whoa, 4 months, so on and so forth. And so it's the same thing here. Yeah, there's a moment, there's like a flutter in my body that I feel, and I go, oh, that would be fun. But I'm here for the food anyway, so we can eat and go home and sleep, and tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah.
So it's
not feel shit the next day.
Exactly. And like particularly in those early years, Saturday nights were very hard. Like, I'm not going to lie, they were very, very hard for me. It was very triggering for me. For someone who used to, as I said, get invited to a lot of things, Saturday night was like radio silence, my phone. And I used to kind of try and force myself to go to sleep at like 8 o'clock because it was painful. But I'd wake up at like 5 on Sunday, and I would go for a surf, or I'd go for a run, or I'd just be hanging out with Smokey, or I'd just go do things. And by like 11 o'clock, you know, what I done in that time was just phenomenal. And then other people were just kind of waking up from their night. So it's kind of like you really take those little wins. And, you know, I always say like a bean in the jar. And they compound. That's what compounds. And take those wins and sit with those wins and be proud of yourself for getting that. And then that is what builds the resilience and the strength to keep going forward also for me.
Amazing.
Mm.
Amazing. Another short cultural insight, because I just remembered you said thrown it away. Maybe for everyone that's listening, that might sound weird at first, but in Vietnamese, if you stop doing something, it's not the same way like you say it in English. You would say like do you say I stopped drinking most of the times, or I
gave it up.
I gave it up? It's something that you give up, right? In the meaning of it, in that sentence, something that you would still like to do, right? In Vietnamese, you say bỏ. In your case, it's bỏ uống, which means I threw away drinking. So it means that it's something that you don't even want to do anymore. Same with cigarettes or whatever. So it's just a very nice wording, I think, for something that you actually don't want to do anymore.
Yeah, and you know, when you first told me that, we weren't even in Vietnam, and I was very appreciative that that's an outlook. Of course, there has been some persistent uncles, as you know,
Very persistent.
but as a concept, I really enjoyed it, and I've actually shared that with friends and clients as well, because I think it's very, very valuable. It's all about the approach and perspective in the way that you view it about making choices for yourself. Agency is so powerful. Making the choice, being a sovereign of those decisions, that is the difference between a healthy recovery and a very confused and potentially disruptive recovery. And it's really beautiful when, once again, you're making that choice for yourself and you can stand within that conviction, because this is everything. And I really enjoy that. And as I said, this transition period has been what it's been, but I'm grateful for everything, absolutely everything, you know, for all of the lessons, all the teachings, all of the discomforts, all of the new comforts, health benefits, you know, clarity, most importantly for me, the clear mind. Learning compassion was a life changer for me. You know, if I'm tired, I'm just tired, and that's okay. And if I don't have to be doing things or achieving things to be proving myself. I don't have to, you know, love isn't conditional. It's like, you know, and you develop a deeper, honest, and more true relationship with self. That has been the thing that stood out to me the most. And I feel very aligned with the life that I've lived and what has happened periodically through the chapters of the life that I've lived. And I mean, it's been already 7 years and it will just continue. But, you know, I'm 39 now and stepping into my 40s. Like, I couldn't be more excited. You know, I'm just so pumped to actually just go, yeah, man, like, because you made the right choices and it's going to be exciting. It's not a drag. You're not dragging your feet. You're not overwhelmed. Like, you've created stability in your life. And that's something I didn't necessarily have. So, you know, you got to give yourself a pat on the back. And to put that into perspective, there was so many years or times in my life where I couldn't even see that value within myself. Couldn't even say the words that I'm proud of myself. And now I can openly share it because it's the truth. And it's nice when you get to witness yourself. So it's a journey of self-discovery. You're just moving the obstacles that take that chance to go deeper out of the way.
Beautiful. Do you want to share anything else around that?
Yeah, for sure. So it was really interesting too because within this 7 years, I've had businesses, I've sold businesses, I've lived up in remote Aboriginal communities, I've worked at drug and alcohol rehabilitation centres, I've studied, I've got an education, became a therapist, and put everything into perspective. And it wasn't ever because, oh, I've walked this path and now I'm going to go help others. It was just this natural stepping stone and progression within my life. Like I look back at my barbershop and how I held space. I specifically had hour-long appointments. So the men and women who would come in as clients had more time without their phone, more time with conversation, more time to really lean into self-care. And I love that facilitation. It was very intentional. And so I realized that I'm already walking this path. And it's something that I love to do. I get so much joy and satisfaction when I get to sit and work with clients and guide them within themselves to retrieve the answers of how the patterns of their life are showing up and how to navigate that. And ultimately, they are left with their own agency, their own choice. And so it's a really beautiful moment where you have held space for somebody to look within, and over a period of time, you become redundant because they are now within their own confidence, their own convictions, and their own deeper understanding of how to show up the way they want to authentically, and now with tools to be able to be kind, compassionate, and accepting and forgiving of themselves. And I've seen some phenomenal transformations. And I feel very blessed that I get to do the work that I do. And also to be able to step into the creative projects I've always wanted to do, the podcasts and moving back overseas and being on the road again and being back surrounded in submerging cultures. And I wanted to really set up the foundations and the building blocks to be able to not only create a stable life for myself, my partner, but also to have the educational background, the life experience background to create a deeper offering for people and the work that I do. And so it has taken many years, but it has been paying off immensely in all areas. So yes, I have experience in drug and alcohol addiction. I have first-hand experience in a lot of areas, but most importantly, I have a deep well of empathy and non-judgment for anybody who is choosing to step into a deeper knowing and understanding of themselves, because it is truly the thing that changes your life.
Beautiful. Do I understand this correctly? Meaning, let's say someone would approach you with, let's just to bring it back to alcohol, with a problem, no matter how deep or how far they are along that way. Does that mean that you wouldn't necessarily tell them to just stop?
No. Because it's not one glove fits all. It's about understanding the relationship. And it's not my relationship with alcohol, it's that person's relationship with alcohol. But then more importantly, what is their relationship like with themselves? Because if they're outsourcing to something to receive or to suppress, then there's a lack of connection within themselves, for themselves. So unpacking that in a way of just seeing what is working and what isn't, and why old conditioning is in fact at play more so than active behaviour. So there's layers to what it is. But as human beings, there's a beautiful saying, you can't read the label from inside the jar. And that is what's so beautiful when you get to step into a space of facilitation. It is basically saying, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, but let's look at it from another point of view. Let's see a different perspective on how this is playing out. And we are creatures of habit. So once one understands the pattern and ultimately how it's playing out, then they can make a choice on whether or not that is actually aligned with who they are now currently and who they ultimately want to be, or how they want to be as a parent, as a boss, as a family member, as a friend, things like that. And intrinsically, people know whether or not this correlation. But I said, I work with many clients who have no problems at all with alcohol or drugs. So, but it's more about connecting with self and realizing that something doesn't feel right. And we go to the root of that. And that's the most important, because that's what creates lasting change. You know, and I specifically don't focus on just the past. We only investigate what past is actually showing up in the present, which is ultimately affecting the future. That's it. I'm not a traditional therapist in that sense. And it's more about relationship building with self.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
It's
Bye.